Lynn, the next question comes from a senior, very senior Senate staffer, and you'll be able to tell very clearly who he works for once I read the question. He says that, and this question, by the way, did come from the Democratic retreat. For people who are not aware of it, President Obama traveled to the retreat yesterday afternoon to speak to the members of Congress. One of the things that this staffer pointed out to us is that in that session, unlike any other session that took place, some sessions were public, some were private, but even in private sessions, staffers were allowed. In the session with Obama, even senior staff were not permitted in the room, which gives you some idea of what probably went on in there. But what he says is, obviously, he says all of us are braced for President Obama's State of the Union address, and very specifically, we are braced for what is broadly expected to be a wholesale attack on Social Security. He says that is likely, but also given the response that I understand that the president got from those gathered here in Easton, he may save it for a later date. But let there be no doubt that there is going to be a major attack on Social Security. And whether or not Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid can keep up his spirited defense of Social Security, or whether he's going to end up buckling to the pressure, is still an open question. And he goes on to say that for those people who missed it, Reid distinguished himself by saying the obvious on one of the Sunday talk shows a couple of weeks ago, where he said that Social Security is not contributing to the deficit, that any shortfall it faces is still very distant, and that in any case it's relatively minor. Senator Reid said he was tired of people picking on this program, which is vital to the financial security of tens of millions of retirees and disabled workers and their families. And since most of us know that truth is a rare thing in Washington, these comments really stood out. As I think everyone who's gathered in your audience knows, Senator Reid was one of the leaders of the fight against cuts in Social Security at the beginning of George Bush's second term. However, it is questionable whether or not he can keep all of the Democrats together to defend Social Security during this term. My thoughts on the matter, as someone who's tasked with working on this, is that since what Senator Reid pointed out in defending Social Security was undoubtedly true, that we have to identify the reason why Social Security would be under such constant attack. And I want to put on the table what I think is going on, and I'd like Mr. LaRouche to comment on it. Obviously, for anti-government conservatives, Social Security is the worst nightmare imaginable because it's a government program that actually works. Its administrative costs are less than 1/10 as high as they are for the financial industry. There is no fraud, and the program does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is provide a core retirement income and protect workers and their families against disability and early death. Now, there's no doubt that even though this is the case, that the anti-government conservatives themselves are not strong enough to cause the kinds of problems that we face. And there is no doubt that the forces that are arrayed against Social Security are enormously powerful, far more powerful than the neocons. One element of this is that Wall Street really hates the idea of government money going to anybody but them. And since the vast majority of Social Security benefits are going to low and middle income families, the program is an outrage to their sensibilities. But the bottom line, and this is what I'd really like Mr. LaRouche to comment on, is that the financial industry in the United States knows a cash cow when they see one. It would take, by my estimate, more than $10 trillion in private accounts to generate the same amount of money as Social Security pays out each year in benefits. If the financial industry collected just 1% of this sum in fees each year, it would mean another $100 billion a year into the coffers of Merrill Lynch and other such individuals. I think that if, in fact, there is any hope of Senator Reid keeping the Democrats together in defending Social Security, that this is a truth that is going to have to be told. Mr. LaRouche, do you agree that this is part of the attack on Social Security?
Of course it's part of the attack on Social Security. The purpose of the policy behind this attack on Social Security and otherwise is mass murder. I mean, you know, the typical problem with Democrats, who are decent Democrats, is when it comes up against the health care bill, and we raise the question of the mustache, they say that's over the top. That's not over the top, they're under the bottom. Look, and there are two errors here. First of all, it's immoral, simply immoral. There's no question about Social Security. It's a system that worked. It does work. There's nothing wrong with it. There can be abuses of it, but there's nothing wrong with it. And it's better than the alternative. And you better start from there. Just think of the alternative. What is the alternative? See, the point is, if in a society which is consistent with the intention of our Constitution, remember, our Constitution was a conception on which the existence of our nation depended at the time. In other words, as of 1787, if Hamilton had not made the proposal he made, on which the entire Constitution is premised, the entire Constitution is premised on Hamilton's discovery. It was not unique to him alone, but he made it clear and proposed it in 1787. That was the foundation of the U.S. federal Constitution. At that point, what Hamilton solved was the basis for organization under which the existence of the United States could be defended. So the Constitution was based on the principle on which the very existence of the United States depended entirely. And that was a credit system, not a monetary system. So when you're talking about money, you're talking about equity in terms of money as money, you're not in the American constitutional orbit. Money, equity for money is not the issue. I don't give a damn about money. I just want an orderly credit system and a money to match. But the value lies not in the money. The value lies in the productivity. It lies in the number of lives maintained, and productive lives in particular. It lies in the education of our children. It lies in all of these things that make the nation work in terms of physical economy. In other words, you have two things. You have a money system, which can be of one of two forms. A monetarist system, which is what all these damn politicians talk about, is a monetarist conception of money. The United States constitutional conception of money is a credit system, not a monetary system. Is credit for what? As in the case of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, in the Pine Tree Shilling. It was credit for what? That you would go engage in a debt, a money debt, agreement to pay with goods. And you, because you knew that you would be able to pay it back, to produce more value by postponing the payment than you would by taking it now. The politicians talk in terms of money terms. They talk about monetary equity. The United States Constitution is not based on monetary equity. It's based on a credit system. That's our Constitution. If you want to practice monetary equity, go to another country. Move your offices from Washington to some other country where they do this kind of thing. And tell all the others who have the same view to do the same move. The credit system does what? What's the basis for economy? Stop all this technical nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. The question is the productive powers of labor. What do we mean by productive powers of labor? We mean the ability to maintain a population with a certain life expectancy and with a certain power to produce that which it needs for its own existence and for the improvement of society afterward. In other words, it's a physical standard. So we don't assume there's any value intrinsic to money. We assume that we need a credit system which uses money as an instrument for this purpose of going into debt in order to produce physical wealth or the equivalent of physical wealth. And if you don't materialize the obligation with physical wealth or the equivalent, or that which produces physical wealth, with the life of a human being, then it's not worth anything. European systems are monetarist systems. The empire is a monetarist system. The American Constitution is based on a credit system. The entire design of the Constitution, especially its preamble, is based on this conception of a credit system. It's spelled out very clearly in detail by Hamilton in his reports on, for example, on manufacturers. His report on credit. This is exactly what the Constitution means. And what the problem is, our Democrats are talking about a monetarist system. And the monetarist system is the disease that's killing us. Franklin Roosevelt's intention in terms of the Glass-Steagall Act was a credit system. Roosevelt all the way through was a credit system, not a monetarist system. And the problem with our Democrats, they're not Americans. They may be nice Europeans, but they're not Americans. And we got to get the Democratic Party back into the fold of humanity and decency and things like that. And that means we are enforcing a credit system. We want to see the goods. Just like they did in Massachusetts. They wanted to see the goods on the date that you're supposed to pay the bill. You're supposed to have delivered the goods. And the assumption is that you can afford to pay more tomorrow than you can today by being given the opportunity over a period of time to produce something which has greater value, relative value and usefulness for humanity than if you used up your expenditure right then. Like, if you want to make babies, you got to grow them. You want a population, you got to grow babies. It's the same thing. That's a credit system. Give Mama the credit she deserves. So don't worry about this stuff. I've got this right. Now, I suggest to the kind gentlemen in the Democratic Party that they just halt for 1 minute or two and discover what I've said. They will get an ABC for the first time perhaps in their life in a really competent understanding of what the word economy ought to mean. I mean physical economy. a physical economy in which the idea of credit, a monetizable credit, is based on these considerations. Yes, we use money, but what does it represent in reality? Paper? Monopoly money? Boardwalk anybody? That's the problem. We've got a boardwalk mentality in the Democratic Party. They should take it back to Salt Lake City.